Hey guys, I am going to spend the next few minutes going over some of what we didn't get to cover in class today about how to write a cause and effect paper. A lot of this is on the handout that I gave you, so you can follow along and you can review the material that way, and you can take additional notes on that if you'd like. But I'm going to go through a few of these things. So we talked about the different kinds of cause and effect writing you can do. Talk about a single cause and look at its effects. So an event or something like that, and then trace it out. What are the results been? For the assignment that I'm giving you guys, I'm asking you to look at technology and teenagers, and I'm giving you some leeway about what you do with that in cause and effect relationships. But one thing you could do is what effect has social media had on teens. So the cause in that would be social media, and you would then trace out several different effects that you see from that. Does that make sense? On effects maybe on relationships or on communication styles or whatever that would be appropriate for the assignment. So that would be a single cause, social media, and tracing out multiple effects. And you would create a thesis based on what you think those effects are. Now, you just want to be really careful, as I said in class, in all of these, there's always more causes, there's always more effects. You have to be clear when you write a thesis and when you construct your introduction and when you're making your arguments that you're never claiming more than you can prove. So you could never claim, here are the only effects that social media has on teenagers. These 3 things. I've narrowed it down, it's only 3. That would be silly, of course, but you can say that these are 3 effects. So just make sure that you don't claim more than you can prove for any of these. Then we've got the multiple causes producing a single effect. So if you said, if your effect was teens feel isolated, then you could say, okay, what are the multiple causes of that feeling of isolation, that maybe teens feel increasingly isolated? And you might connect that to social media or technology, or you might say teens feel increasingly connected, if you could make that argument. A causal chain we talked about. I'm not sure, you probably could develop a causal chain for the assignment I've given you, but nothing's coming to mind right now. So be creative if you want, that would be fine. And then single cause, single effect, like I said, that's not usually going to make a very interesting paper. So you're not often going to be doing that kind of writing, but it is an option. It might be an assignment that you would have at some point. So for this essay, for this length, you want to try to bring to light a cause or effect that your audience hasn't considered. You might issue some kind of call to action, especially about technology. You might say, all right, here is an effect that we don't like. Here's what teens could do to change it, or maybe here's what parents should do to change that effect. But you have to make a case that you've identified accurately the cause in order for people to be motivated to make a change to the cause to differentiate the effect. Does that make sense? So if you're saying teens feel isolated and you feel like you've established clearly that one of the reasons they feel isolated is because they spend too much time on their phones, and you'd have to be specific about how much time is too much time on their phones, then you might issue a call to action to parents or teens to reduce the amount of time they spend on their phones. So here are a couple of sample thesis statements for these different kinds of essays. If you were talking about a single cause producing multiple effects, you might have a thesis that sounds, and this is not for your assignment, this is just in general sample thesis. Although many people see Valentine's Day as a celebration of love and romance, in actuality it causes false expectations among couples and feelings of loneliness and isolation in single people. And in this case, you might not always have in these cases a traditional 5-paragraph essay. You should still shoot for an essay that's about 2 to 3 pages in length. But in this, you might have a 2-body paragraph, 4-paragraph essay, where you've got 1 paragraph about false expectations among couples and 1 paragraph about feelings of loneliness and isolation in singles that are caused by Valentine's Day. You could say that the cause is not Valentine's Day itself, but the commercialization of it even. That could be a different cause. So make sure that you accurately identify your cause. So multiple causes producing a single effect. All right. The enormous popularity of the Super Bowl in the United States. So that's our single effect. The Super Bowl is popular, hugely popular. That's an effect. The enormous popularity of the Super Bowl in the United States is caused not by the popularity of the teams involved. So here you're saying, all right, you might think this is the cause. It's not the cause. not by the popularity of the teams involved, but, and now here are the 3 reasons. And by the way, all of these are on your handout that I gave you on, I think on the assignment sheet actually. So don't feel like you've got to memorize these pearls of wisdom. This is caused not by the popularity of the teams involved, but by a sedentary society's need for vicarious physical activity, a passive society's need for displays of aggression, and a threatened society's need for a symbolic victory. So this would probably be a longer essay than you are going to be writing, but you would have a section on how our society is sedentary and how because of that, we are drawn into an activity like watching the Super Bowl because it makes us feel vicariously like we are being physically active, even though we're not. The passive society's need for display of aggression, you'd have to first establish that we are indeed a passive society, that we don't stand up for things, that we are not taking risks, or we are not, as a society in whole, behaving aggressively, but that we still have a need for aggression, and so we vicariously experience the aggression by watching something like the Super Bowl. And a threatened society's need for symbolic victory, you then have to first establish that we feel threatened as a society and we feel better when we see somebody win. So that would be a multiple causes producing a single effect, the effect being the popularity of the Super Bowl. Certainly you could make many different arguments about why the Super Bowl is popular. Those are just a few that one author might make. Another one, the causal chain. Here's an example of that. Most new fashion trends begin in the runways of New York and Paris and end up on the clearance rack of Walmart in Topeka. So that's a causal chain. I haven't listed all of the steps of the causal chain in my thesis. I don't need to, but I would definitely need to clearly make all the links from Paris to Topeka in my paper. And so I might have multiple body paragraphs. I might have 4 body paragraphs or 5 body paragraphs, shorter paragraphs for each step. That would be a little bit more like a process analysis style of essay. No you, no second person. But I don't mean that. I mean you'd have kind of like here's a step and here's a step and here's a step, and the number of steps would determine the number of paragraphs you probably end up having. And then the single cause, single effect might be something like this. Although the chairman of Fox Entertainment Group argues that the network continues to offer reality TV because of its responsibility to satisfy the audience appetite for such fare, the truth is the rash of reality TV shows is the result of irresponsibility by the networks and others. So we have these TV shows because the network executives are irresponsible. One cause, one effect. All right, so if you're going to outline these, like I said, you may or may not have the traditional 5 body paragraphs in an essay like this. You're definitely going to have an introduction, and let me say again, listen closely, everyone. Listen, look into my eyes and listen to what I'm saying. You do not proceed directly from a hook to a thesis. Repeat it after me. I will not, go ahead and say it. I will not proceed directly from my hook to my thesis. Okay, now I'm assuming that the reason you guys keep doing that, you keep going from your hook to your thesis, is not because you are trying to make me go insane, but because you don't know what to say. Think about what makes sense. Consider your audience. They don't know what you're talking about. If you just waltzed into my house and said, hey, have you ever thought about how it's crazy that the sky is blue? Here's 3-point thesis, right? Where are we coming from? I don't know. Give me context. Lead me gently by the hand. So if you're going to argue that something about social media and its effect on teens, you might start with some statistic about how many hours a day teens are on their phones or something like that. And then you might provide some other background information. Since the release of the first iPhone, the percentage of teenagers using smartphones has increased from blank to blank. You might provide a little bit more background information in that case. You might talk about the number of hours, like some scientific studies about the effects. Like you can have a little bit of that information in your introduction. You don't want to rob your later paragraphs from information you need to put there, but you can establish that there's a problem and you're going to talk about what are the effects. Like here's the problem, but we don't really understand what it creates. Or here's the cause. The cause is all this, like there's cell phones. What's the effect? Then your thesis could be the effect. The effect of spending all this time on their mobile devices on teens is blank, blank, and blank. So walk us through. It depends on your paper, but for all these essays you guys are writing, put yourself in the minds of somebody else. And remember that activity we did. You can start here and you can end here, but you have to make the links along the way. You can have a hook that is not even directly linked to your thesis, although it's not a bad idea for it to be, but you make the connections clearly. Make them more clearly than you think you need to. Like maybe say things more often than you feel like you're repeating yourself in your introduction. If you do that, and I think you're repeating yourself, I will tell you, but it would be better than what you're doing now, which is like, we're here, thesis. Ah, where'd that come from? Don't do that. Okay, that was an aside that was not directly, that light in the background is driving me crazy. Now it's just glowing. Oh, what part of my house do you want to see now? Okay, so I'm going to pause it there so it's easier to upload these videos because smaller files move more quickly. So that was part 1, end of part 1. Bye.